In 1997, the Quaker Oats company sold the Snapple brand for $300 million, which sounds like a pretty good chunk of change. However, this was $1.4 billion less than they paid for it just 2.5 years earlier. That means they lost approximately $1.6 million every single day for almost 900 days. On top of that, it is estimated that Quaker lost an additional $100 million on operating costs during this period. And although Snapple sales prior to this acquisition had dropped, and the so-called New Age beverage category was experiencing slowed growth, many experts attribute the rapid collapse of Snapple to poor management and marketing. In fact, some people might consider this 2.5-year period to be one of the most consequential marketing failures of all time. And what's interesting about this story is that Quaker didn't appear to make any obvious marketing blunders, like that of New Coke, for example. Nor did the company experience an unexpected crisis that dramatically shifted consumer attitudes towards the brand. Instead, Quaker made a series of subtle mistakes that were inconsistent with Snapple's beloved brand and ultimately lost the respect of their core customer base. Today, it serves as an important lesson in brand marketing. So, what exactly happened? To understand what happened, we need to go back to 1972, when Leonard Marsh, Hyman Goldman, and Arnold Greenberg founded Snapple in Long Island, New York, which interestingly was originally named Unadulterated Food Products. Their mission at the time was to supply health food stores with fruit juice products, and over the next 2 decades, the brand became recognized as a healthy alternative to soft drinks like Coke and Pepsi. Their brand was viewed as a homegrown, people-person business that working Americans loved to support. During the late 80s and early 90s, the Snapple brand grew rapidly across the country and was generating upwards of $230 million in sales per year. In 1991, something innocuous happened that would end up having a profound impact on the company's brand and its ability to create meaningful connection with their customers. It was in this year that Snapple hired a lady named Wendy Kaufman, who plays an important role in this story. A year into her role in the shipping department, Wendy noticed that fan letters started to pile up in the mailroom. Letters from customers expressing their admiration for the company and sharing experiences they've had enjoying Snapple products. Wendy recalled an experience when she was a kid and wrote a letter to an actor she admired but never received a response back. This experience stuck with her, so she asked Snapple management if she could write personal letters back to these fans so that they were not left unanswered like hers was. Her request was granted. So she started responding to fan letters, which resulted in an even stronger connection with Snapple's biggest brand advocates. Think about this for a moment. Most Snapple customers buy an iced tea at the store and go on with their day. But a small percentage of those customers feel compelled enough to pick up pen and paper, write a letter, and mail it to the company. Now imagine how those people feel when they receive a letter back from Snapple. This small gesture demonstrates appreciation for that customer's business and likely increases that customer's affinity with the Snapple brand. At this point, you've almost guaranteed more business from that customer and possibly increased the likelihood they're going to recommend Snapple to their friends and family. So there's likely a pretty substantial return on investment earned from just a few minutes it takes for Wendy to write a letter and the cost of a postage stamp. Wendy was slowly creating meaningful and lasting impressions with customers, one letter at a time. And this is marketing lesson number 1. Find opportunities to surprise and delight your biggest fans. Shortly after she started responding to fan letters, Wendy moved into a full-time customer experience role. Interestingly, Wendy and her team started categorizing the letters they received into a massive database, which they could use for future product research. Okay, we'll come back to Wendy in a moment. The next important event that happened was in 1992 when Snapple hired a marketing agency called Kirschenbaum Bond and Partners to help the company continue its rapid growth. While searching for creative ways to communicate with Snapple's core audience, the agency recognized an opportunity that stood right in front of them: Wendy Kaufman. She was already the point of contact for the brand's most engaged customers, so they proposed incorporating Wendy in a series of advertisements where she would read and answer genuine customer letters, causing Wendy to become known as the Snapple Lady. Here's an example.
Hello from Snapple. Today's letter is from Nancy Lambert. Her dog Shane can be asleep in the back bedroom, but if you open his Snapple, she comes running. This I gotta see.
Shaney, would you like some Snapple? Shane, look at Snapple. You decided you want to sleep while everybody's watching you. What's Daddy drinking?
Oh, they're good.
What is it?
Say I love Snapple. Come on.
Pink lemonade.
Made from the best stuff on earth.
Forget it.
From 1993 to 1995, the agency created 37 commercials, or about one per month. The commercials had a laid-back and casual tone and appeared to be made on a lower budget, which was quite a bit different from the polished and high production value commercials from competitors like Coke and Pepsi. But most importantly, it made the Snapple brand feel like something their customers could relate to because it was authentic and didn't feel contrived. Here's another ad.
Hi, a kid in high school wrote to me from detention. I only have a Snapple iced tea to pass the time. Signed, suddenly caught talking. Poor guy.
Hey, excuse me, is Jeff here? Thanks for your letter, Jeff. Here's some iced tea to pass the time. But remember, nothing takes the place of a good education.
Have some Snapple, man.
We didn't know he could write this well. Maybe we'll use some of that writing energy in his English classes.
One of the co-founders of Kirschenbaum Bond and Partners said in an interview that our ad agency's plan was to make it look like Snapple had no ad agency. It was way ahead of its time. When we proposed Wendy as the spokesperson, Snapple wanted supermodels. The agency felt that Wendy was a more relatable spokesperson for the brand, and customers seemed to agree. Snapple's sales were $232 million in 1992 before the ad campaigns launched, and reached $674 million in 1994, an astounding 290% growth in just 2 years. In 1994, at the peak of Snapple's massive growth, with projected annual revenue of $700 million, the company was acquired by Quaker Oats for $1.7 billion. This move would make the Quaker Oats company the third largest producer of non-alcoholic beverages now that they owned both Snapple and Gatorade, which at the time was doing $1.2 billion in annual sales of its own. The only two companies they trailed were Pepsi and Coke. It is believed that Quaker might have been feeling pressure to expand its beverage position, and that Gatorade may have been at risk of acquisition from Pepsi or Coke, or that maybe Coke or Pepsi would acquire Snapple themselves. So logically, acquiring Snapple allowed Quaker to become a more dominant player in the non-alcoholic beverage category, and diversified its risk by adding a complementary product line. It is also believed that executives at Quaker felt confident in continuing Snapple's growth due to their experience marketing Gatorade. But as you're about to learn, this turned out to be one of the reasons they failed. The first mistake Quaker made was failing to understand why Snapple's marketing worked in the first place. For starters, they tried changing Snapple's retail strategy. Up until this point in Snapple's history, their products were sold primarily in single-serve units inside of cold display cases, those things you find near the checkout at grocery stores, convenience stores, and gas stations, whereas Gatorade was often distributed on store shelves in packages. What Quaker wanted to do was replace some of Snapple's cold display inventory with Gatorade products, while also adding more Snapple products on shelves. This is a rather subtle change if you think about it, but it actually deviates quite a bit from the behavior in which Snapple customers are used to buying the product. You could hypothesize that cold display units are designed more for impulse purchases and for immediate consumption, as would be the case with people on a lunch break looking for a drink to pair with their meal. Whereas items on store shelves, which are not chilled, are usually bought in bulk and for home consumption. So the occasion in which products on each of these two retail displays are purchased for might be completely different, even though they can be purchased from the same store. This is potentially a huge risk when you're breaking the known pattern of consumption that Snapple's products were built on. But apart from that issue, many of these retailers actually resisted swapping Snapple for Gatorade in their cold displays. And in fact, the contracts many of these retailers had with Snapple meant that they didn't need to comply with Quaker's request to sell Gatorade instead. As a result, this initiative from Quaker didn't even allow them to change the cold displays as they had intended, and it also tarnished many of the relationships with these retailers that had taken years to establish. Another mistake, which was borrowed from the Gatorade playbook, was introducing 32 and 64-ounce Snapple beverages instead of the current 16-ounce size, a strategy that they thought would help them achieve higher profit margins. However, this strategy failed again because Quaker didn't understand Snapple's audience and how they typically consumed the product. As we now know, Snapple customers often bought single-serve units to enjoy casually with lunch, and the 32 or 64-ounce size was simply too large for that occasion. The reason this strategy worked with Gatorade was because their customers were drinking the product during exercise, which required more hydration. Also, because exercise sessions and team practices often lasted for longer periods of time, maybe a couple hours, in which case a larger beverage size was beneficial. All of this brings us to marketing lesson number 2. Understand who your customers are so you can market to their needs. But likely one of the most consequential mistakes they made was drastically changing Snapple's advertising strategy. This involved using a new ad agency and firing Wendy Kaufman. The Snapple lady, who had played such an important role in building the company's brand, was now gone. Quaker, with the support of its new agency, wanted to make a big splash in the market with their new advertising campaign. The premise of this new campaign, titled "We Want to Be Number 3, was that Snapple had no desire to compete with the soda brands holding the number 1 and number 2 spots, which were Coke and Pepsi at the time. Instead, they were content being number 3 in market share because it allowed them to be more flexible with their product flavors, and also that they wanted to be the best and not necessarily the biggest. The slogan for the campaign was "Freedom, Freedom," and the strategy was to air print, radio, and television ads. The TV ads would be 30-second commercials aired at all hours during the day, with new commercials being added into the mix after 2 weeks, which is interesting. I assume this was for the purpose of reducing ad fatigue. Unfortunately for Quaker, this campaign fell flat and continued Snapple's decline. Upon first impression of these new ads, it might not be obvious why they didn't work. After all, there were some similarities with regards to the bizarre, high-energy feeling that the ads portrayed. However, when you look closer at the messaging, you start to realize some of the key differences which may have caused a lackluster response from Snapple's core audience. For starters, there was a noticeable difference in the production quality between the old ads and the new ads. Remember from before, we learned that Kirschenbaum Bond and Partners intentionally designed their ads to look less polished because they felt it was a better representation of how their customers viewed the brand. The customers viewed Snapple as being a smaller, more personable company versus a faceless corporate machine. My second observation is about the subject matter of the ads. The old ads involved the Snapple lady reading customer letters, so the focus was on the customers themselves, often either fulfilling a request of theirs or sharing a bizarre experience they experienced or described while enjoying Snapple products. The subject of the new ads was about becoming the beverage company with the 3rd largest market share, something that customers probably couldn't care less about. To be fair, I think that the point of being number 3 is that it allows them to focus on their customers because they can be more experimental with their product flavors and introduce a greater variety of products. But that message is overshadowed by the "We want to be number 3" tagline. Also, these ads completely remove the unique individual customer experiences that were the focal point of the previous ad campaign. So in just a couple years, Quaker completely transformed Snapple's brand identity as it had been communicated in their advertising campaigns and had tried to alter its point of sale strategy. The result was a rapid erosion of trust with their retail distributors and a customer base that felt that Snapple no longer understood them. At this point, it was starting to look like Snapple might be on the brink of complete failure. However, thanks to a group of people who understood what made Snapple great in the first place, the company's story has a happy ending. In 1997, less than 900 days after Quaker first acquired Snapple, Quaker found a buyer to take the brand off their hands for just $300 million, or $1.4 billion less than they paid for it in 1994. The buyer, a company called Triarch, was known for buying deeply discounted companies, and saw an opportunity to restore the brand to its former glory. Senior Vice President for Marketing at Triarch Beverage Group, Ken Gilbert, described Snapple as being a mainstream brand with a non-mainstream brand character. He and his team felt that the brand did a very good job with their advertising in the past, speaking specifically to the unconventional commercials created by the Kirschenbaum Bond and Partners agency. What they wanted to do was launch an advertising campaign that captured the quirkiness of the Snapple brand, while also having an ad that focused on the product itself. One of the things that differentiates Snapple from its competitors is the variety of product flavors they have to offer. So Triarch proposed an ad concept where the viewer would be taken inside of a Snapple bottle to reveal a scene inside. Each commercial would have a different, often bizarre scene inside the bottle. The point was to demonstrate that there's something different in every bottle.
Hi. At Snapple, we know the pressures facing young fruit today. How easy it is to go bad, start hanging with the bad crowd, mixing with preservatives. That's why here at Snapple, we've created a place where good fruit can come to get even better, to learn skills, to interact with other fruit they would never meet on the outside. Snapple and fruit, making the best of it together. The best stuff is in you.
We saw Quaker trying to communicate a similar message in their ads, specifically how being number 3 allowed them to be more experimental with product flavors. But the reason I don't think it worked for them is because the primary message of the Quaker ads, which was also supported by the dialogue and visuals, was that they wanted to be number 3 in market share. That was the focal point of their commercials. So the product variety message was secondary to that, and as a result, they were making it difficult for customers to take that message away from their ads. But with Triarch's new ads, the visuals, the dialogue, and the bizarre scenes were for the purpose of highlighting their primary message, that there's something different in every bottle. Triarch also understood the mistake that Quaker made by tarnishing relationships with their retail distributors, who by now were starting to move away from selling Snapple products altogether. In an attempt to win back these distributors, Triarch executives learned and performed magic tricks at distributor meetings claiming that the magic is back at Snapple. It was a bit of a corny gimmick, but this simple gesture demonstrated that Snapple's new owners were going to be doing things differently. This in and of itself was a pretty smart marketing tactic, and one that worked. Many of the distributors gave Triarch a chance because they demonstrated that they understood the spirit of the Snapple brand. And this is marketing lesson number 3. Your brand needs to reflect your company culture, and vice versa. Also, learn to market to your audience, even if that audience isn't your customers. In this case, they deployed a marketing strategy to try and win back the trust of retail distributors. Regarding company culture, Snapple's enthusiastic and unorthodox brand didn't work with Quaker's rigid and structured professionalism. But Triarch built a team of people who more closely matched the personality of Snapple's once great brand. A Harvard Business Review article described it pretty well by saying that, in contrast to Quaker's buttoned-down, coolly professional culture, Triarch is the sort of place where employees wear costumes to work on Halloween. This reflected in the way they started marketing the company as well. Triarch understood that reviving this brand would not be easy, nor would it be possible without taking risks. So the team was granted approval for trying unorthodox things as long as the cost of failure was minimized. In other words, they could take risks as long as the cost to implement them was not too big. In the first week, Triarch ran a campaign where they rehired Wendy Kaufman, wrapping her picture on a bottle, and paraded her down Fifth Avenue. They shot a commercial to go along with it, and launched a new product called Wendy's Tropical Inspiration. This was one of the many spur-of-the-moment ideas that were tested quickly without any structured processes or risk analyses. It was a departure from what consumers had experienced under Quaker's ownership, and it quickly got distributors and customers excited about the brand once more. In fact, Triarch was able to increase Snapple's sales for 11 consecutive quarters and grew annual sales to $772 million in 1999, while turning a profit of $111 million. Shortly after that, in 2000, the Britain-based Cadbury Schweppes company offered to buy Snapple for $1.4 billion, and Triarch accepted. So in less than 3 years, Triarch took their $300 million investment and flipped it for $1.45 billion. It should be noted that both the Mystic brand of tea and fruit drinks, as well as Stewart's Root Beer, were part of this deal as well, and that Snapple itself was not responsible for the entire $1.45 billion of that acquisition price. However, Snapple was the largest of the 3 brands at the time, and regardless of the company's valuation, would have been a significant return on investment for Triarch, making it a rather impressive turnaround. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and checking out my analysis on Dollar Shave Club and how they've mastered the use of humor in their marketing. Thanks for watching.